This podcast is for SEO professionals, and each week, with the help of our wonderful guests, we discuss the important stuff that actually affects our careers and progression, but sadly often doesn't get talked about. You know, the invaluable soft and interpersonal skills that are often taken for granted, such as the skills we need for listening, time management, communication, and more. We also talk about the big issues that affect us and our careers, such as burnout, imposter syndrome, self-belief, saying no, plus other big issues and obstacles. With this podcast, we want to share knowledge on topics that unlock our listeners' true potential and enhance not only their careers, but all parts of their lives. So, are you ready to prioritize your own personal growth and career development? Then let's crack on with this week's episode.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the SEO Mindset podcast, where your hosts are myself, Tasmin Suleiman, and my very dear friend Sarah McDowell. We have new episodes going out every Thursday, and this week I'm speaking to Ed Deason all about how to price your services and why we find it so difficult. Ed is an experienced business coach who works mainly with founders and freelancers, including some very well-known SEOs. He helps his coachees sign up more clients, grow their businesses, and the most important thing, find balance and live the life that they ideally want to live, their ideal lifestyles. We had a really interesting conversation, really went into depth about why it's so hard to price our services and what's going on in our minds, and then the consequences of that mindset. He then shared how we can shift that mindset. So a lot of the inner work to do, and on top of that, some great models about actually how to do the pricing. Now, before we get into the episode, reminder that if you're enjoying what Sarah and I are doing, there are various ways that you can donate. Various ways that you can support Sarah and myself. So the first one is donate via the Buy Me a Coffee link, which is in the show notes. And the other way is to follow us on social. So we are everywhere. We're on Instagram, we're on LinkedIn, we are on X, or what used to be known as Twitter. So find us, come and have a chat with us. That would be wonderful. But now let's listen to the conversation between myself and Ed. Hello, Ed, and welcome to the SEO Mindset podcast.
Hi there, Tasmin. Thank you for having me.
Oh, no, I'm really looking forward to this conversation because we're talking about money, and it's not something that's talked about enough, considering it's such a big part of our lives. So that's going to be really great for our listeners. And before we dive into the topic, you mainly coach founders and freelancers, is that right?
Yep, absolutely.
How did you get into that?
It's so interesting. So my background is sort of 15 years of line management in corporate roles, and then I sort of coaching and mentoring in those, and then kind of officially getting a coaching qualification about 4 years ago. And I kind of fell into coaching founders and freelancers, but I suppose the reason I've stuck with it and what I find really interesting is with so long in corporate, 15 plus years in corporate, I've got a master's in business administration as well, and during those times I learned all these wonderful strategies for marketing, for pricing, for selling products, for all the kind of the great stuff that happens in big corporations. And when I started working with freelancers, I realized that the freelancers didn't have access to all this information, and all of these models and concepts most of them work just as well for freelancers, people working on their own, as they do for enormous corporations, but they don't really have access to it, and no one really talks about it and talks about those concepts and those models. And so I found there was kind of a natural place for me to help with the business side of things. The founders and freelancers I work with are brilliant SEOs, brilliant virtual assistant, brilliant website designers, but where they tend to have a bit of a struggle is on the business side of things. And there are all these wonderful concepts out there that they don't have access to, And I found, well, these are things I've been doing for the last 15 or so years. It felt like a natural niche, natural place for me to be able to help people.
And I think even if we widen that group, this commercial element to working, be it in your own business or as a freelancer, and even as an employed person, there are still challenges with that. So if you're going for a job interview, how do you set the right salary? When you are in a role, how do you ask for a pay rise? These are all really tricky situations that can be made that much easier by having some core concept ideas and the mindset, which we're going to go into anyway today. But I definitely struggled with it as an employed person, as somebody working for myself. Why do you think pricing our services, be it in a workplace or in a more commercial environment, is so difficult?
Oh, I mean, talking about money is difficult, isn't it? It seems to be anyway. There are depending on where you live in the world, there are some parts of the world that talking about your salary is a very natural, normal thing, and other parts where it is not so much. I think that probably, particularly when it comes to pricing, so for SEOs, for freelancers, and some of these things apply a little bit to people asking for pay rises or people in promotions in that kind of situation. There are three things that I think are really powerful and really kind of influence our ability to have these conversations effectively. And I'm going to talk about them in the context of freelancing, but like you said, they're probably just as applicable outside as well. So there are three kind of, I think, psychological triggers that are worth talking about. So one of them is having a scarcity mindset. One of them is imposter syndrome, which I'm sure people will be aware of. And one of them is loss aversion. And I'll talk about kind of the three of them, if that's helpful, and then talk about why kind of collectively it makes it so difficult for us to talk about pricing and to price ourselves appropriately for the services we're offering. Sound good?
Yeah, I'm intrigued.
Let's do it. Okay. So, I'll start with scarcity mindset then. So, scarcity mindset. This is something that is kind of evolved, right? This was something that was useful to us thousands and thousands of years ago when we were hunter gatherers, right? And scarcity mindset is all about our bodies, our behavior, putting a lot of importance on being aware of scarcity, right? So, when we were hunter gatherers, if we found a blueberry bush, right, the scarcity mindset would be telling us, eat the blueberries right now. Don't wait for them. Don't hope they'll be here tomorrow or the day after or the day after. Scarcity is a real thing and you need to deal with it right now. Right? And that was super useful to us thousands of years ago when we were hunter gatherers. It's not quite so useful to us now. And the way this kind of impacts us is, let's say you were doing a client pitch, and it's that little voice going, I don't have enough money. I don't have enough clients. I can't screw this up. I have to get this right. When I say a price, it can't be a price that scares them off. Yeah, because there aren't enough jobs, money, clients to go round. Right, it's that idea of scarcity, and because you're stuck in that scarcity mindset, you're focused on the fact that you feel like there aren't enough clients to go around. Your kind of time horizon narrows right down, and you're stuck very much in the present. Yeah. So you can't imagine a future where there are lots of clients. You're just stuck in this one moment where you're going, okay, I've got a client in front of me. I cannot afford to let them go. So I'm going to say yes to things I wouldn't necessarily say yes to. I'm going to lower my prices. I'm going to offer discounts. I can't let this client slip away from me. And that's that idea of that scarcity mindset. So when you're in a place where you're kind of operating from a place of fear, where you're worried about that, or when you feel like there aren't enough clients to go around, there aren't enough jobs to go around, your horizon narrows right down and you make decisions you wouldn't otherwise make. On top of that, there's also imposter syndrome, right? And this is a big one, and I know people will be familiar with the term imposter syndrome. And this is that little voice that says, you're inadequate. You're not good enough. How can you possibly think of charging those kind of rates? They're going to realize they're only your second client or they're only your third client. And that's the kind of little voice that makes you doubt your worth. Yeah, it's that mindset challenge that says, I'm not good enough. I'm not worth what I'm asking for from these clients. So that's two of them. And then the third one is loss aversion, right? And loss aversion is the idea that as humans, we are much more kind of acutely impacted by a sense of loss than we are a sense of gain, right? And in this context, that means, let's say I wanted to up my pricing. Yeah, and I'm an SEO. I'm thinking about increasing my pricing, and I'm thinking, okay, what shall I increase it to? Have a think about it, and then it's that little voice that goes, if you increase it that much, you're going to lose half the market. 80% of people aren't going to be prepared to pay that, and that flicks that little loss flag, that little bit of loss aversion that makes us go, oh, I'm going to be losing out on a huge chunk of the market. Yeah. And again, we're primed for that. It's a behavioral response. Thousands of years of evolution has told us that losing things is bad. Yeah. And so we view, when you think about things in terms of loss, I'm going to lose access to 80% of the market. We get stiff. We stiffen up and we go, oh, maybe that's not the right decision. And we end up in a place where we've got these three things, right? We've got a scarcity mindset telling us there aren't enough jobs and money to go around. We've got imposter syndrome telling us we're not good enough. And then we've got loss aversion telling us that even if we were to increase our rates, we're going to lose access to a huge chunk of the market. And you've got those three things working against you. And you can see why it's so hard to change your prices or to pick a price that feels comfortable, because fundamentally you feel uncomfortable about all of it because you've got all these things working against you.
And the knock-on effect. So things that are popping in my head. For example, when you said scarcity mindset, and then so you think, what if I don't get this client? I can't mess this up. And then in the rest of your life, your spending habits are going to change as well. There's this story, I can't remember why where I heard it from, but it's way back. I think I'm talking about 70s. And there was a divorce, like a millionaire couple, and the husband and wife were splitting up. And the wife was a wealthy woman, but she did something really bizarre. That's why it's probably stuck into my head. She bought a deep chest freezer and she filled it. Now, whether she thought, where's my next meal going to come from? Let me just fill this stuff with food because goodness knows what's going to happen next. I don't think she needed to worry about that. And if you're then spending less, being scared, that's a horrible, horrible place to be. And another story that's coming into my head is when Tony Robbins was at the beginning of his career. He didn't have much money, and his coach suggested that he got two bills, whether it's $1 or $5, I don't know what it was, and then lots of paper in between, paper clipped together. So he felt like he was a rich man. And it's that mindset of convincing yourself. So that knock-on effect. And also this loss aversion. So I've never heard it called, never heard that there was a term for it, that if I price myself out of this market, what's going to happen? And you're told, but then there's another market that you will end up in. But that's so hard to do.
That's it. And this is the exact point, right? You feel losses more than you feel gains, right? So yes, realistically, you're gaining this chunk of the market that is prepared to pay those prices. But your natural instinct, what's been kind of what we've evolved to do, is focus on the loss, focus on the fact I'm losing access to 80% of the market, not focus on the fact that I'm gaining 20% and it's the more affluent 20%. It's I'm losing 80%, and that's the only bit that we can focus on. And then when you wrap that up with imposter syndrome and wrap that up with a scarcity mindset as well, it becomes so difficult to rationally price. Yeah, you and that's where with pricing, you've absolutely got to be rational about it. Yeah, because you need to know, this is how much money I need to live. This is how much money I need to pay my bills. Those are all very, very rational things. But what happens is we get caught in this very emotional cycle, where we're worried about scarcity, where we're worried about whether we're good enough, where we're worried about whether we're going to have access to the market. And that's all very emotional stuff. And you can't price from a place of emotion. You've got to be in a place of kind of logic and rationale.
And there's also so many other elements, because you might be feeling great about yourself and great about the pricing and absolutely confident. But if people don't want that thing, then you're almost at the other end where pricing isn't a problem; it's a product that is a problem. You touched on a few things that people end up doing, like signing up to, agreeing to do things that they wouldn't normally do.
Mm, yep.
What are the main mistakes people make when they are pricing their services, when they are in this very difficult place of scarcity and imposter syndrome and loss aversion?
Yeah, absolutely. There are some pretty common ones I see, to be perfectly honest. So undercharging is probably the most common one. It's probably the most relevant one to the people that are going to be listening to this podcast. It's simply just not being comfortable, not being able to ask for what you're worth, and charging a lower rate than you should be charging, than your experience indicates you should be charging, than you need to be charging to have a sort of a decent lifestyle that you're happy with. Undercharging is the first one. Charging hourly rates, right? And this is kind of a classic one for people getting into freelancing for the first time. Is people get stuck charging hourly rates, and the problem with hourly rates, of course, is there are only a finite number of hours you can work in a week. Yeah, you want to be working somewhere between 25 and 35 for most people, I would say. And if you charge an hourly rate, you can only earn for the hours that you're working, right? And if you haven't, particularly if you haven't got your pricing right, you're going to be charging too little. You're going to be charging if you're charging on an hourly basis, it's not like you can add extra clients in. Once you hit your 35, 40 hours, it becomes less healthy to add in extra clients and extra hours, and therefore you're very limited in the amount that you can charge, right? You can up your hourly rate, but that has, there's quite a clear ceiling on that. What are the other things? What are the other challenges we see? I think a common one I see with people is, and this maybe ties into the hourly rate one, is not focusing on value. So when people are having pricing conversations with potential clients, they talk about the what they're going to deliver, and they talk about the how they're going to deliver it, but they really don't talk so much about value. So I'm trying to think if I've got a good example for this. Okay, so one of my clients, so we started working together at the start of this year, and they were making in the region of about $6,000 a month. Right, so fairly healthy. I think there are probably a few people who are going to listen to this that go, I'd be quite happy with that. But their intent was to grow their monthly income. And, I think we're sort of 6 months into the year, or 6 months into our time working together. They'd grown from about $6,000 a month to about $17,000 a month. So that has added about $10,000 a month to their revenue. And they're in SEO as well. So the reason I guess I'm talking about this is when I talk to other clients, this is what I talk about. I talk about the value that my clients have seen working with me. I don't say you're going to get X number of coaching sessions and we're going to spend X amount of time together and this is how we're going to do it. What I say is, here's an example of a client that's worked with me. Here's the value they've seen. They've added $100,000 plus to their annual income as a result of some of the things we've done. And actually, in that example, a big chunk of that extra 10K a month was down to pricing. We improved their pricing packages. So it's getting your pricing right is super important. But what I see, the challenge I see is freelancers talking more about the process, more about the how and the what, and not talking so much about the value that they can deliver, right? And if you want higher paying clients, if you want clients who are prepared to spend more for your services, you've got to be able to talk about the value that you deliver for them.
And I guess the knock-on effect of all of that then as well is, if you are pricing by the hour, not charging enough for that hour anyway, then eventually you're going to burn out, because there's only so much you can do. If you want more, you're just going to work more and more and more. And that's probably not the reason you went into freelancing in the first place.
No, absolutely. You don't become a freelancer because you want to work more hours than you were in the corporate world. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's hourly rates are one of the things that I think as soon as it's possible to move away from, you should do, right? You should be moving to a package-based rate, or you should be moving to a value-based rate. If you can add 100K to your client's income, they're not going to mind you asking for 2K a month, are they? If I said to you, I'm going to bring you 10K a month and it's going to cost you 2K a month, you'd go, well, yeah, okay, that sounds like a pretty good deal to me.
All right. So what if the results that you're getting them, the value that you're adding to their lives actually isn't tangible in that way? So the things that I offer are not tangible. And one of my, I won't say biggest success stories because it's quite, I don't know, sad story with a happy ending. So a particular person who got in touch with me, she had lost her husband. So they had been married, 2 teenage children, besotted with each other, and he was diagnosed with cancer and passed away all in the space of 3 months. Now, she then went on to take, bereavement counselling, all of that wonderful, wonderful services that are on offer, and got to a point where she thought, now I need something different. I don't know who I am. I can't even remember who I was before I got married. And through working with her, when she and I parted, she said to me, I'm now excited for a life that I didn't ask for, but I'm excited for it. Now, when you think about value, well, that's brilliant, because suddenly she has a thirst for life again. But how do you put a price on that?
Okay. So if you can give an ROI, right? That's always my view. If you can put a financial value on it, do, because that tends to be the headline grabber for people. But if you can't do that, so for SEOs, for example, you might not be in a place to guarantee, okay, or to say you're going to get another 10K a month, but you might be able to say something like, what would it be like if you didn't have to do all the outbound prospecting anymore? What would it be like if clients came to you? How much time would you have back in your calendar if you didn't have to do outbound? Talk about the kind of results they'll see. And really the questions, you ask the questions so that they can say to you, oh, this, they're almost convincing themselves, oh, well, if I had 10 hours back in my calendar each week, I'd go and do this, this, and this. If clients came to me instead of me having to do outbound, I'd be able to spend more time doing something else, doing something I enjoy more. I'd be able to spend more time improving this element of my service.
Good point.
Yeah. So if you can't talk about direct financial value, start asking the kind of questions that get your clients to explain how important, what the kind of value they'll see.
That's a very, very, very good point. Wow. Okay, so we have talked about why it's difficult and the common mistakes people make. I think let's just take a short break, absorb some of that, and then when we come back, talk about what people can do about it.
We all want to grow in our careers, right? But finding the right resources, well, that can be tricky. Enter Rank Suite, your go-to for self-paced digital marketing training. At Rank Suite, they focus on what actually works. They're not just about SEO, they're about helping you develop the skills that matter in the digital world. Whether that's mastering technical SEO, diving deep into content strategy, or making sense of analytics, they've got you covered with fresh courses every single month. And they don't just hand you the basics and walk away. Many of their courses come with downloadable frameworks, worksheets, and challenges to help you apply what you learn. Who are our instructors? Industry experts who are out there doing the work every single day. They're not just talking about it. And the best part, they're committed to white hat, sustainable strategies. There are no shortcuts here, just actionable knowledge, peer-reviewed for quality. Are you ready to take control of your learning? Start your journey with Rank Suite today by clicking the link in the show notes. Use the code SEO Mindset at checkout to get a 30% discount and an extended 21-day free trial. It's your pal Sarah here. Would you like to support the podcast? Do you want to support what me and Tasmin are doing? Well, there's lots of different ways that you can do that. For example, we are set up on Buy Me a Coffee, which means that you can give us a one-off donation. We'd be very much appreciative of that. And if you leave us a message, we can also give you a shout out. We're also on social media, so let's get connected. Reach out, follow us, ask us questions, send us a message, suggest topics, whatever you want to talk to us about, we are all ears. We are on all the major social media platforms: LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter or X. I'm not sure how you're meant to say that now. But anyway, there is a link in the show notes where you can follow us. But just search the SEO Mindset and we'll come up.
Okay, Ed, welcome to part 2 of this very interesting topic. And you've already touched on so many points of struggle with freelancers in the SEO community and wider community of how to set their prices and what common mistakes they make. And you talked about, scarcity mindset and imposter syndrome and loss aversion, which I've never heard of until today. So thank you for that. So here is, imagine you are talking to a freelancer. Imagine somebody is going through all of this. And you've talked about mindset. What sort of shifts need to happen for people to confidently set their pricing?
I think there's one big one, which is, it's the opposite of the scarcity mindset, but it works kind of across all three of those things. And that is essentially fostering an abundance mindset, right? And an abundance mindset is pretty much what it sounds like. It's the opposite of having a scarcity mindset. It is being able to look to the future. It's being able to recognize that there are more potential clients out there than you could ever possibly hope to serve, right? And honestly, it doesn't matter how small your niche is, there are going to be more clients out there than you could ever possibly hope to serve. Yeah. If I think about some of my SEO clients, a lot of them work with B2B companies, B2B SaaS companies, right? And even if they charged a rate that took 90% of B2B SaaS companies out of the potential customer pot, there would literally be thousands left in there that they could work with. Yeah. And it's about recognizing this, that, it's about recognizing that when you go through a dry spell, when potentially you haven't heard from clients for a while, those things happen. They are part and parcel of being a freelancer, but there are more clients out there than you could ever, ever, ever hope to serve on your own. Okay. And it's about kind of taking a step back. Yeah. And there are some ways that you can focus on this. You can ask yourself, in terms of getting clients, what's worked for you before, in terms of, where you've had success in finding clients in the past, and you can go and do some more of that, the whole time remembering that there are more clients out there. Yeah, there will always be more clients out there. If you're in B2B, SaaS, SEO, there's probably, in the time that we've recorded this phone call, 3 more B2B SaaS companies have started up, right? It's essentially taking a breath, pausing and going, there's more out there. There's more out there than I could ever hope to serve. Even if I increase my rates by 50%, there's going to be more clients out there than I could ever hope to serve who would be prepared to pay those rates. Yeah. I think the only challenge for pricing, or the main challenge for pricing, is when you are in a place where you cannot cover your bills. Yeah, and that is a caveat, and it's a fair. I'm sure people will call this out and say, look, if I'm in a place where I can't afford to pay my bills, I will take whatever work I'm offered at whatever price I'm offered. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to argue with that. I'm not going to say that's a silly approach and you should hold out and you should try and negotiate more. If you're in a place where you cannot afford to pay your bills, then you need to do what's right for yourself, for your family, and that's appropriate. Yeah. But I would always say, hang on to the idea that there are more companies out there. There are more potential clients out there than you could ever.
So just off that, just picturing somebody's got a client and it's yippee and let's get on with serving that client, and rightly so. maybe reflection at that point of, okay, how did I attract that client? Because I don't think that piece is done enough. I know that there's a whole raft of like marketing information, but that particular piece probably not talked about as much. And I think when you talked about if you are needing to put another meal on the table, you're going to take that client. Something I heard, where did I think it was Alex Hormozy in one of his 100 million books. He was saying that he needed to get rent to pay. He needed that particular client he was talking to. And before, if the client said to him, I don't know if this is going to work for me because I eat out a lot, he would just say, no, I don't think it is going to work for you, and wish you well, but this, we can't go any further. That particular month he needed the money, and this particular client said, or potential client said, I eat out a lot. And he said, if I were to create you a cheat sheet of what you could eat when you were out and about, would you sign up? And they said yes. And what that then ended up becoming was another branch of his business. So I think also sometimes when we say yes to things that we potentially wouldn't have said yes to if things weren't as scarce, maybe look at what is it I'm solving here that I wasn't solving before.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I meant to talk about this earlier, but actually there's a useful point in here about when a client says to you, if a client says to you, I can't afford that. Yeah. Quite often the natural instinct is to go, okay, I'll lower my prices. And actually the better approach is if a client says, I can't afford that, the response is, if you're an SEO, for example, the response is, no problem, let's look at my package and we'll see what I can take out. Yeah. And what that does is it gives you the freedom to take out some of the more time consuming stuff. So that gives you more time to go and do some business development, go and find some other clients. And it gives you a way to bring down those rates without kind of locking yourself into something that's going to stop you getting a load of free time. Right. So, and it's something that tradesmen have used for years and years and years, right? If you get someone in for a quote to do something in your house and you say, oh, could you make it a bit cheaper? They're like, yeah, sure. What would you like me to take out? Yeah. But I don't see freelancers doing it enough. Actually, they just go ahead and discount their rates when actually they could be saying, no problem, let me see what I can take out.
Because you'd freeze, wouldn't you? Especially if you were in that, I really need this client, and they say, no, I can't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
You would be mortified. And then that's when the emotion kicks in. And as you said, fix your prices using your rational part of you, not the emotional part of you.
Yep.
So I think that's what most people would do. It's what I would do. Like, okay, or okay, yeah, cringe.
You default to going, oh,
it's like, okay, bye.
I'll discount. Yeah. And actually, yeah, and this is it. And and actually, you talked about the rational and the emotional there, and this is why it's really useful. When you're doing pricing, to do it outside of a client call, going into the client call knowing how much, or into the conversation with the client knowing how much you want to charge, how much you should be charging, and also knowing that if the client says that's too much, having an idea of what you might take out to bring the pricing down. Right? You don't want to be doing those things on the fly, because that triggers all the emotional side of things, and that bit of your brain is the bit that's firing rather than the logical bit that goes, right, here's how I can approach it.
Hard though to do. So I suppose do as much prep as you possibly can. Yeah. All right. So
Absolutely.
is there anything else on the mindset shift? So you've talked about having an abundance mindset. What ways that you can develop that abundance mindset?
I think a big part of this is reflecting on past successes. Reflecting on the things that have gone well for you in the past, reflecting on the clients you have had, reflecting on where you've been satisfied, where they've been satisfied as well. Reinforcing you've had clients before, they've had good experiences with you, you've had good experiences with them. There will be more opportunities to do those things in the future. It's about taking a longer term view of things. Anything you can do that helps you recognize there is a future, rather than you're kind of stuck in this present moment going, I'm worried that.
And this is something that most people struggle with. So if you talk about, and I suppose it's an extension of gratitude, if you talk about practicing gratitude or appreciating your successes, often there's like eye rolls going on. Oh no, she's banging on about gratitude again. But it's necessary, isn't it, in the realm of work we're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're a freelancer, chances are at some point in your career, you're going to go through a drought and you're going to feel some of those things that we've talked about. And it's about, taking a few moments, grab a pen, grab some paper, spend some time thinking about, okay, talk about your successes, write down your successes, write down how you felt during those times, really take a moment to reflect on the fact that you've been in a good place before, things have gone well for you, you've had happy clients, and therefore, you've had happy clients, you're
I
likely
think
to have
so.
happy clients
As
again.
you were speaking, one thing that popped into my head is once you've been through a year of freelancing, reflect on, okay, where were the quieter periods? When was it more busy? People
Mm,
like health coaches are going to be
yep,
busier in the run up to Christmas, Christmas onwards. And then I suppose in the summer months, maybe not so
yep.
much. So the more experiences you can enrich your mindset with, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're diverging a little bit from price here, but another one is potentially get comfortable with doing some outbound work. A lot of people I know rely almost exclusively on inbound, so clients coming to them. And actually, if you can get a bit more comfortable with doing some pitching, doing some outbound work, it gives you the ability to sort of fill up those gaps if things start to quieten down for you
So,
on the
are
inbound.
there any other strategies for setting prices? So, you've mentioned, be comfortable with your pricing before you go into a call, having an awareness of if the objection is the price, then what you can reduce, and try not to charge by the hour rather than go for the overall value that you bring
Mm.
to that client potentially. What other strategies are there?
Oh, see, this is the bit that people care about. They're like, right, great, Ed. I hear you saying that I need to get my pricing right, but
Yeah.
how do I actually decide how much to charge people?
Yeah.
Right? That's the juicy bit. This is where the value is, right? So, okay, so I've got two that I prepared in advance for this. So if you see me looking to the side, I'm just going through some of my numbers. But these are really about, right, how do you set a price, right? How do you set a price that enables you to achieve what it is that you want to achieve? Yeah. So both of these strategies require you to know how much that you want to make a year. Yeah. So, and I won't go too much into detail about that, but you need to think about, if you're trying to work out how much money you need a year, you need to be thinking about, right, what do my bills cost? What other things do I want? How much fun do I want? How much money do I want to spend on fun? How much money do I want to spend on leisure? How much money do I want to put into savings? Right. So eventually you get to a point where you go, okay, I need X amount of money on an annual basis to fund that lifestyle. Right. And that is going to look different for everybody. The examples I've picked, I've gone with 60K here, so mostly because it makes the sums a bit easier. So I've gone with an easy figure here, so all the sums work out. And what that means is, so this SEO that I'm pretending to be, they want to make 60K a year. Okay, that's their annual income goal, and that enables them to live the lifestyle they want, etc., etc. So the first one of these, and you might want to, if you're watching or listening, you're going to want to pause as we go through this, and I'll talk through the sums. Okay, I'm afraid there is a little bit of maths involved here. So so the first one, you want to take your annual income. Okay, so 60K. Our aim is 60K. You want to divide it by 12 to get the monthly income. So in that case, 5K, of course. And then we want to divide it by the number of clients that we expect to manage across the year. Okay. So in this example, 5 clients. Okay. So we've taken our annual income goal, which is 60K. We've divided it by 12 to get 5K a month. And we expect to, across the year, on average, have around 5 clients a month. Yeah, so I think you can see where this is going. Divide the 5K a month by the number of clients, which is 5, very conveniently, to get 1K. Okay, so that means you need to charge your clients £1,000, and you need to have an average of 5 clients a month. Yeah, and each of them needs to be paying you £1,000, and that will get you to your income goal. Yeah, so that's the first way of doing it. Take your annual income, work out how much that needs to be monthly, work out on average how many clients you think you'll have. Yeah. Now, the more accurate you can be, the better. Yeah. So if historically you've had 4 clients a month, don't put in 5 clients a month is what you're expecting. Yeah, put in 4 clients. and just be as accurate as you can, because that means you're much more likely to hit your income goal. Yeah, so that's the first one. Annual income goal divided by the number of months divided by the average number of clients. Yeah, and that tells you I need to charge £1,000 per client.
Yeah.
In this example,
a lot of
clear
richness in what you've just said, because, for example, you talked about how much knowing how much you need, and I was watching a YouTube video, and she called it the 3 Fs: fundamentals, fun, and future. And most people don't know what those numbers look like. Most people don't sit down and go through their finances to that level and categorize it. Another book I was reading recently, and he called it a freedom number. So your freedom number is your fundamentals. Know what that number is. But then, isn't this a bigger thing that people don't talk about money? They want it, they need it, they are generally happier when they've got more of it, or they strive to have more of it. Whether they're happier because of it, that's another philosophy completely. But it's about being comfortable, isn't it? Which is something we touched on right at the beginning.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I could talk about personal finance for hours and hours and hours. So if you're a freelancer, right, and this is super important. If you're a freelancer, you need to know how much you need to live on. Yeah, no question about it. If you don't know what that figure is, if you can't tell me that, if we would have a conversation tomorrow and you couldn't tell me what that figure is, you need to go away and work it out. You need to know how much your bills are. You need to know how much time you want for fun, and you need money you want for fun, and you need to know how much money you want for savings. Yeah. And actually, funny enough, you talked about more money makes you happier, right? There's a point where it starts to tail off. You get diminishing returns, and funny enough, it's around the 60k mark.
And
so
they say after that, if you're not giving it away in some shape or form, by giving it away, that's then what gives you that additional joy from that money. Yeah.
Okay, so that was the first strategy, right? And both of these work for SEOs, because so that one is quite, you quite often will have a monthly retainer with clients, or you'll have an ongoing relationship with clients. So working on a monthly basis, knowing how many clients on a monthly basis, that one works quite effectively. This other one is about having an hourly rate, right? And I know I've talked about not having hourly rates. So this is an internal hourly rate. This is an hourly rate that you do not ever share with your clients, right? But it helps you price your products and helps you price your services appropriately. Okay. So with this one, we're starting again with our annual income of 60k. Yeah. This time, we want to divide that by the number of weeks we want to work in a year. Okay. So in this example, I would like to work 48 weeks out of 52. Again, 48 is a convenient number here because it divides 60 quite well. So I want to work 48 weeks out of 52, right? So I divide 60k by 48 to get the weekly amount I need to be charging. And then I divide that number by the number of productive hours I expect to work a week, right? And productive hours means the hours I am going to be working on client work, not the hours I'm working on business development, not the hours I'm working on LinkedIn, the hours I'm going to spend working for my clients. Okay. So in this example, I'm saying that I work 25 hours a week, okay, on client work. So if I was an SEO, that would be doing, writing content, creating content, listing, all the other stuff that happens with SEO. Okay. So I take my annual income of 60k. I divide that by 48, which gives me 1.25 off the top of my head. And then I divide that by 25. Yeah. It gives me 1,250. Then I divide that by 25, which gives me 50, right? And that 50 is my hourly rate. Yeah, my internal hourly rate. So I know that if I'm speaking to a client in a pitch and they've told me the work they want doing, or I've told them what I will be doing for them, I need to estimate, right, I think on a monthly basis, that is going to take me 10 hours. Yeah. And knowing that my internal hourly rate is £50 per hour, I know that I need to charge them at least £500 for that piece of work. Yeah. And that gives me, and if I charge them £500 for that piece of work, and I work all the hours I'm expected to work, and I work all the weeks I'm expected to work, I will hit the end of the year at 60K. Yeah. Now, if I've got fewer clients than normal, or I'm not working as many weeks as I thought I would, or I'm working fewer than 25 hours, then I just adjust the sums accordingly. And that means that, so maybe I haven't got as many clients at the moment, so actually I expect my productive hours to be 20 hours. That means the next client I speak to, my hourly rate needs to be £70, for example, and therefore I need to charge them £700 for that piece of work. Yeah, and that enables you to go in knowing, right, this is how much if this is going to take me 10 hours, that's £500. If it's going to take me 20 hours, that's £1,000.
You had me until that last sentence. Because I'm just thinking, yeah, that makes sense. Well, yeah, I get that. I can see where the sums are flowing. So I'm at £50 an hour.
Yep.
And then for whatever reason, instead of those 5 clients, or 25 hours, I've only worked 20 hours in January. And then I get another person, and my gut feel would be, I really need this client. I really need this client. And instead of charging more, because I need more to make the sums work, to make my life work, you end up charging less because you're scared.
And that's why we're calling out the scarcity mindset, the imposter syndrome, and the loss aversion, right? And that's why you need to prepare going into these calls. You don't want to be doing these sums on the fly. You don't want to be trying to work it out as you go. You want to go into that call knowing it needs to be £70 per hour. You talk to the client, you realise working with them is going to take about 10 hours, so £700.
So true. But
That's why
when
you
I've
have to
seen
prepare in
conversations
advance.
on various platforms saying, I've just turned a freelancer and I'm going to be doing this sort of work, and how much should I be charging? There's no comprehension or no conversation about what is it that you need to live on. It is, in general, this is how much people.
I know, and fundamentally this is the problem, right? People aren't sitting there going, how much money do I need to charge to have a happy life, to live the lifestyle I want, right? They're sat there going, okay, well, if he charges 20 and he charges 50, and well, I'll go somewhere in the middle, and then the problem is, because you're not tracking it, because you are not doing it in a way that is intentional, you end up hitting the end of the year being nowhere near your target, because at no point were you pricing.
And you said a great
based on where
word
you
there, tracking, because again, that's another thing that I think freelancers don't do enough. I read somewhere that if all you do is look at how much money came in and how much you spent each month, and focus on how can I bring in a little bit more and be more careful with my spending, you will automatically end up making more money because you're focused on it, you're intentional about it. But it's almost like, I'm going to be a freelancer, and then you close your eyes and you scootle along and you just hope for the best.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is what happens. And there's obviously a limit to the sums that I've just talked about there, right? If you want to make 200K a year and you're only working 5 hours a week, you're probably not going to get any clients that are going to be prepared to pay those prices, right? There's going to be very few clients prepared to pay those prices. And that's not to say those clients don't exist, but they probably won't exist for you. Yeah, it'll take you a while to get to those places. And anyone in those places doesn't need me to talk to them about how to price their packages appropriately, right? So there needs to be a level of common sense, right? And you also need to apply a bit of common sense in terms of where the market is as well. Yeah, if you are in a horrific market, and it has been pretty challenging for a lot of freelancers recently, you need to do what's appropriate. You need to do what feels right to you. And just because you want 60K, actually there might be a case where this year you can live on 50K, and if that's more appropriate, then you need to make those choices. It's not black and white, it's not hard and fast. These are the approaches I would take if I was trying to work out how much I should be charging clients, but you need to be pragmatic
circumstances
as
for family, circumstances with all sorts of things. So again, that fundamental cost of living for yourself is really critical to know.
Yeah, that's it. You've got to know how much it costs to live. Yeah, and then the other things you might be flexible on.
More than run over time, but I just felt like, this is so useful. And the examples that you laid out, the last two examples, although people may have to adjust it according to their personal circumstances, at least it gives you something to start with. So thank you so much. You've talked a lot about a lot of great things. What are the main takeaways that you're hoping that the listeners gain from it?
I think maybe the key ones are recognizing when you're in a place where you're kind of operating in a kind of an environment of fear. So when you've got that scarcity mindset going on, when you're feeling a bit of imposter syndrome, when you're feeling a bit of loss aversion, recognizing those things, recognizing they're kind of a natural part of who we are. But actually, when you're feeling those things, that's not a time to be making a decision about pricing, right? You need to move to a place where you can be slightly more rational. You need to be thinking about that abundance, thinking about that future opportunity, those future opportunities that are out there. And then you can start to be a bit more rational about it, prepare ahead of
That's
time,
brilliant.
use some of
Then
those
who
techniques to
is
set your
out there?
pricing.
We usually ask this question, who in SEO should we be following, or wider? Feel free to pick any area that you think is relevant.
Oh, who should you be following? That's an interesting one. I mean, in terms of SEO, I'm always going to call out people like Ben Goody and Taylor Share, both clients of mine or both ex-clients of mine. Brilliant SEOs, absolutely should be following them. I mean, if you liked the business kind of content from today, please feel free to give me a follow as well. I talk about the business side of freelancing quite a lot.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. And what's the
Who
best?
else I'd
Again, we
recommend at the
asked
moment?
what's the
Stick with those
best
for now.
career advice you've been given, but feel free to. What's the best money piece of advice you've been given? Or you can stick to career then.
Oh, that's such a hard one. No, I mean, there's so much good money advice out there. Have a budget. I think is super important. So we talked a little bit about that already, right? Have a budget, know how much you're spending, know how much you're earning. If you can do that, you're going to be, ahead of the game. And do put a little bit aside for the future. Yeah, it doesn't have to be a lot, and the earlier you start putting money aside for the future, the better position you will be in, right? So even if it's 50 quid, 100 quid, or dollars, the sooner you can start putting that
I
money
tend to
aside
agree with
in a
you on that one.
pension of some
Absolutely.
form, the
Thank you
better you will
so
be.
much for all
Okay.
of your advice today, Ed. This is a very different type of episode for us because usually it is about career, but this is all connected to it. I'm definitely going to be getting my calculator out once we hit stop recording.
Yeah, but honestly, it's funny, isn't it? I've almost all of my clients, one of the first things we talk about in our sessions is pricing. And it's such a common one. Someone commented on one of my posts yesterday that pricing was probably the biggest challenge they had when they were starting out, and it's so common. So
No,
if you're
no,
listening to this and
absolutely.
going, "Oh yeah,
But
I
yes,
definitely do these things,"
again, thank
you're
you
definitely
very,
not
very
alone.
much for this. So, just a reminder to everyone that episodes will go out every Thursday. I think this is going to be a very, very well listened to one, and a reminder that if you enjoy what Sarah and I are doing, if you're enjoying the content, then there are various ways to support us. One of those is to donate via the Buy Me a Coffee link, and there is a link in the show notes. And follow us on social. Our LinkedIn is doing really well, thanks to good old Crystal. And the Instagram as well is doing really well. Again, all of the links are in the show notes. So until next week, thank you very much.
What if you could take control of your career growth on your own terms? Well, that's exactly what Rank Suite is here for. Rank Suite is more than just SEO. It's a complete digital marketing training platform. With courses covering technical SEO, content, and analytics, they give you the tools to grow your skills at your own pace. There's no shortcuts, no gimmicks, just real sustainable strategies taught by industry experts who live and breathe this stuff every day. Plus, it's packed with worksheets and challenges to make sure what you learn sticks. Are you ready to take the next step? Start your journey with Rank Suite today by clicking the link in the show notes. Use the code SEO Mindset at checkout to get a 30% discount and an extended 21-day free trial.